question you asked was offensive to me, and I am not,
Are you going to subside soon?
No, I'm not.
But I think it also deepens your appreciation, in my case, of the human spirit and the commonality of our existence.
But we can't be what we can't see.
No, I
So
know.
if we never have culture on our screen, if we never see our heroes in those contexts, how do we expect our children to strive to those great heights? This is what we need. We need our stories on our screen.
I would very much like to see films and television and theater about women, you know, in their 60s, in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I think that's the next fresh voice that we need.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, The Zoomer with Conrad Black and Denise Donlan.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to The Zoomer. Around the round table, it's movie night at the Zoomerplex, and we've got a star-studded table, and in a moment, we're going to tackle the question, is the movie biz ageist? Before we get there, Conrad, you've got astronaut Chris Hadfield in the chair this week. He said you took him to places where no one had ever taken him before.
Well, the reverse was true.
Oh, okay.
Here's his book. He's a very interesting man, as millions of people know from his tweets from outer space. And it was a very, very fascinating talk.
Yeah, an interview with Conrad, the final frontier. Okay, so we're talking film and ageism. Let's roll the trailer.
In a world where $100 million movie budgets are controlled by the whims of hormonally challenged teenagers. In a world where one summer blockbuster can launch a career and the sequel can kill it. In this world, the elders are running wild. Now appearing at your local multiplex, old people, lots of them, hot, sexy, masterful actors in the prime of their lives. Because in a world where movie downloading is out of control, Zoomers still actually pay to watch a theatrical release.
So, Richard, right away with you. Hollywood ageist?
Well, I mean, I think that probably the obvious answer would be yes, if you have a look and you see movies like Thor that's opening, and it's going to be a primarily teenage audience. But if you look at who actually kind of rule the roost in terms of being big Hollywood stars, they're all a little older. Tom Cruise, Will Smith, Robert Downey Jr., Sandra Bullock has had 2 #1 movies this year. She's 49 years old.
Of course it's ageist. Of course it's sexist. It's ridiculous. And look what's happening, though. Hollywood movies are suffering in terms of revenue. The real art is happening in TV. And more often than not, the television shows are showing people who are, in all their flaws.
So I don't think that Hollywood is ageist. It's ageist and sexist, it's capitalist, right? So it just goes where the money is. So there's never been a shortage of old men in movies. There's always an old guy in a suit. Always. What there hasn't been are any mature women in movies.
Ruba, even though you're a pre-Zoomer, you've been making movies that feature mature actors, Patricia Clarkson, for example. What is it about the story, the narrative, the craft that draws you to that?
Especially with Cairo Time, I saw my hero as someone who had baggage. She'd been in a marriage for, over 25 years, and she had to be over 50. And when I was trying to finance the movie, I had so many people say to me, well, please, if you could just cast Rachel McAdams, for example, who's in her 20s, your budget would just go straight up.
All the over 50 parts were taken by Patricia Clarkson.
Beverly, you program precisely for this Zoomer demographic. Is it difficult for you to actually find the content that you need to show the audience?
I would say in the last 10 years, there are certainly more films that feature the older demographic as the key protagonist. I call them Zoomerific characters. But I will tell you that it's still not as many as I would like. Our specific audience like warm, feel-good stories with a moral, ethical resolve. And
lots of special effects?
No.
Well, I mean, no explosions, car chases?
That's okay, but we really, gratuitous violence and that sort of thing. They want to leave the film feeling warm and fuzzy and that something inviting happened.
Isn't it only Zoomers who go to cinemas now?
I think that it's so far in Canada anyway. My anecdotal evidence would be that it's kind of a split. I mean, the 2 times I saw Gravity in a movie theater, the audience was older. You know, absolutely older.
That's because George Clooney was there. Even if you never see him, it's because George
through
Clooney
the visor,
was there.
you only see this much of it through the visor.
Totally.
For young people, the backdrop of the movie is very important. It's thriller, it's action,
It's what sells around the world.
As you get older, you really do have to create a story and have something actually happening, like Amour, which is would never have gone on anybody's desk in North America. And we have not tried to create a culture of stories.
So Joseph is writing stories that are very unique stories, right? 3 Day Road and Through Black Spruce and now the Arena and options, I bet. They're coming at you like crazy. What are you going to do when they say the aunt in 3 Day Road has to be Rachel McAdams? What are you going to do?
I'm going to say I want it to be Brad Pitt because then I know I'll sign the movie. I didn't give him a challenging role. And
Brad Pitt is a Zoomer who created his career by creating his own movies. He produces things. And some of them have been outrageously successful, like World War Z and that sort of thing. They've made a lot of money. But he also makes movies like Killing Me Softly, which is an art film about violence that is marketed on the back of the name that he made, making movies like World War Z. But he's handled that very well.
We're going to be back with more Zoomer Film. And here's a look at what they're saying on the street.
I would like to see movies more with plots and stories rather than all of the special effects and so on.
We just came from the film festival, so we were really, really blessed by a lot of really great films.
Enough is enough of Rocky, you know? He should be in a rocking chair is where he should be.
No, I don't think there's enough in the theaters, no, for our age group.
Iron Man, I don't want to see Iron Man, nothing against it. Some men can be ugly young, but they can become very handsome as they get older, where women are very pretty and beautiful when they're young, and they get rather haggard.
Well, you look on Letterman to see who's the guest star, and most of the time I don't recognize who the stars are.
They try to be too young, and they're no fool like an old fool, right?
Make some friends. You're gonna need them.
Back away.
You don't look that smart.
I need a diversion. Showtime.
Let's do it. You hit like a vegetarian.
How are you, Sheriff?
Old.
When's it time to hang up the machine guns?
Well, when you start making movies like Escape Plan, which is just an atrocious piece of crap that it didn't get released so much as escaped into theaters, you know. What it's about are 2 brand names, not particularly actors even so much, but it's Sly and Ernie or Stallone and Schwarzenegger. I mean, you don't even need their entire names to sell this movie. What you were selling is an idea of what they used to be. And, you know, as long as Schwarzenegger can deliver a line like, "You punch like a vegetarian," he's going to work. He's going to find something to do.
But you see movies like Reds 2 with Helen Mirren as an action star, but that's an anomaly. That doesn't happen. You don't see women in these action movies.
There's an all-women Expendables coming.
Men will not watch
How to avoid
women as the leads in films.
Men
women will go and watch a male lead,
That
but
can't
men.
be right.
Will you go to see chick flicks, so-called chick flicks?
Not with much enthusiasm, but there have been, look, in fairness, there have been all manner of actresses that men would be happy to go and see, not just because they're good looking.
It's hard to watch Tom Cruise anymore. He's not believable.
But was he ever believable, is my point about Tom Cruise.
But I mean, now, you know, the Dorian Gray painting is melting. It's ridiculous. You're seeing the age instead of acting. I thought the last Rocky film was the best since the first.
The last Rocky film
because
was the
he
best.
was who he was.
This is the Alison Bechdel test. She developed this in 1985. Here's the test for the movie. Are there 2 women in the film? Do they each have a name? And do they speak to each other for more than 60 seconds about something other than a man?
Yeah.
Right.
Other than a man. Yeah. And you will be stunned at the number of movies, even starring some of these big stars, that don't have another woman in the film. So it's not, is it a feminist film? Is it a girly film?
It's not like that in Europe or the UK.
Well,
No,
why
it's
is
not,
it
but
so
it is.
different in Europe than it is here? And are we just lagging behind like slugs?
Well, there's two things happening.
Sluts.
So, sluts isn't our fault. Vote for yourself again. In Europe and the UK, I find when I'm shopping for films, it's more about story, and that not only will they not look at casting from an ageist perspective, but they forget about race as well. It's who is best for the story and how you can care about the character and get involved in the story.
If you actually go a little bit higher, you know, and we all applauded when Christopher Plummer won his Oscar. But what happens when we're looking at movies like The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel or Quartet? Are these a blip, or are they really opening new opportunities for more mature actors who can
They're
actually...
both British films. They're both. So the opportunity is in the UK. Hollywood is modern. There was an article in The Guardian. Hollywood is basically creating its own, backing itself into a corner with the baby boomer problem. And what they're saying is the people going to the theaters in droves are the demographic of 45 plus. However, they're making these movies that are basically the sweet spot for the television advertiser, the 18 to 34.
Is there any chance that this ghastly cartel that has controlled the film industry for 75 years of 6 studios in Hollywood, that they are losing their grip? Is that what I'm hearing?
Unfortunately not. Absolutely not. My agent is always begging me, my next feature film, stop writing lead characters that are over 50.
Or they call them geezer pleasers in Hollywood,
Geezer pleasers.
And intermission time, here's a look at some upcoming Zoomer films, because there's a lot pointed right at you.
Where are you living now?
Beg your pardon?
You and Barb are separated, right? Or are you divorced already? Is there a younger woman involved?
You've said enough on this topic.
Yes.
Well, see, odds are against you there, babe.
That's pleasant.
You need the money, and I'm closing shop.
I am not a beautiful man.
Is Mick Jagger a beautiful man? You're an experienced lover. Why shouldn't you get paid for it?
¿Cómo te llamas tú?
Gloria.
No te saco de mi cabeza. Estoy todo el tiempo pensando.
¿Y estás separado o no estás separado?
My guess is that Anthony was adopted and sent to America. She's been looking for him. She's spent her whole life trying to find him. I met him.
Where?
At the White House.
Dear God, what was he like? And did you remember anything he said?
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Might have been hi.
What?
It's our wedding anniversary.
Drugs, sex, divorce, death.
Ah, Paris.
There seems to be a very small margin of women who are even working in their 50s. So I think that we need those stories. There's a huge audience out there, and Sex and the City was just the tip of the iceberg. I would very much like to see films and television and theater about women, you know, in their 60s, in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I think that's the next fresh voice that we need. We've heard enough about the 20s and 30s. We know what those are like. You know, those are easy compared to the challenges as you get older.
Well, lots of challenges, not only in terms of opportunities, but also in money. Women actors are being paid a third overall of what men are being paid. So where do we have to go, Wendy?
Well, I think the problem is that we still don't see women in those positions of power. So out of the top 100 grossing films of 2012, women represented 4% of the directors, 12% of the writers, and 20% of the producers. So women aren't in those decision-making rooms, aren't actually creating the vision.
So is it a generational thing? Are those opportunities out there? They're just not in big enough numbers yet?
No, I don't know that those opportunities are out there. I still think it's an old boys club.
It is.
That's set up for men to succeed, and women fall away.
Male stars are not interested in being second billed. They don't want to be number two on the call sheet.
What about in the 30s when women were making the top dollar? The Claudette Colbert, Carol Lombard, Greta Garbo, the highest paid actors and the most eyeballs watching those films too. They were women-led, but surely Sam Goldwyn and those people were still the people making the decisions. They were still in power, weren't they?
But they were businessmen with an artistic side as well, I think, and that's maybe the difference now. Now Hollywood is run by suits who don't care about art. They don't care about stories. It's about money.
The studios aren't all that profitable now, you know.
No, well, it's tough. I mean, the studios, I think, have gone completely the wrong way with a lot of their strategy, in the sense that they'd rather spend $200 million to make a movie with the potential of making $800 million at the box office than spend $5 million to make a smaller, kind of lovely little movie, a two-hander with Mary and Wendy and their lives. That might only, but that only might make $6 or $7 million. So, you know, listen, you know, do we only want to make $2 million, or do we want to gamble big and make $600 million?
Well, we just made that film that had lots of older people in it called The Grand Seduction, being part of the film as a woman from Newfoundland. And there were three fabulous men, Gordon Pinsent and Brendan Gleeson and Mark Critch, and they were running the whole show. And as a Newfoundland woman, I know that in every small community in Newfoundland, it is the women who are running the whole show. But on TV, we have to pretend, and movies we have to pretend is three fellas, like the women are just sitting there going, knitting. That's a great idea, let's do that. You know?
When did we become afraid of those sort of hard drinking, hard partying, childbearing, you know, home supporting women? When did we become afraid of that? When did we need the little sort of, you know, I'm 21, I'm a nuclear physicist.
I've got 7 older sisters.
I'm a nuclear physicist.
Those eyes.
Well, there's lots of Zoomer movies coming out. Beverly, good luck programming them. And thank you, all you wise people around the table. You've put a new wrinkle in my movie viewing plans. Now we're going to talk to Joseph Boyden about his new book, The Arenda. So, Joseph, this is your third, right? Three-Day Road, your third novel. And it's, I gobbled this book up. And it's a real sweeping narrative told through first person, through three people, right? A young native girl, an elder, and a French priest. And it describes the turmoil that happens with the arrival of the French and English to Canada and the destructive impact on First Nations people. When you finished a book like this, a massive, beautifully written book, what do you hope readers are going to think, could take away from at the end?
So I wanted to debunk and dispel the myth that before the Europeans arrived, this was just a vast wasteland of emptiness. There were cultures here in North America that were incredibly complex and incredibly rich in their resources. The Huron people, the Wendat people, just north of Toronto, villages of thousands, agrarian people who could take the time to create art and to create religion and to create a culture that was 10,000 years in the making. And so I think the most important thing I wanted to do was to say these were complex cultures here, as complex as any culture in the world, and religiously, culturally, socially, in fine balance with each other. And I made sure also not to say that this was a place that was a paradise before the Europeans arrived. Of course, there were clashes and conflicts, but they were in very fine balance with one another, these cultures. For example, the Wendat and the Haudenosaunee, the Huron and the Iroquois. But when alliances were made, when the French came, the Dutch, the English, this fine balance was thrown off, you know, and so I really wanted to, if a reader walks away from this book with anything, I hope it's with the understanding that where First Nations people, where my people come from, my mother's people, came from a very deep and amazing place.
Joseph, I'm writing the history of Canada right now, and I'm actually near the end of it, but I naturally spent a great deal of time and attention on the period that you're talking about. And with the utmost respect and with great deference to you, who knows much more better than I do, I have to take issue with some aspects of this. There was a really terrible degree of violence between the tribes and the bands, and some of them, and you say a balance between the Iroquois and the Huron. The balance was that the Iroquois massacred the Huron with regularity.
No, not before the arrival of the Europeans. These were running conflicts that happened, and then of course there was, you know, we all talk, this novel has to deal with the ritualistic torture that did happen between the tribes. And not to make it a lesser thing, the Spanish Inquisition was going on at the same time over in Europe. But these were running battles and running engagements that the Huron and Iroquois had before the arrival of the French. We also have to keep in mind when the first Jesuits came in the 1620s to 1630s, the Huron population was about 30 to 35,000 people. Within 15 years, it was 10,000, and that wasn't through warfare; it was through disease that the French brought.
Which was not deliberately transmitted. It was
no, not deliberately, of course.
But of course, they were remarkably talented in some areas. In Champlain, as you know,
in every area, I would argue.
Well, but they hadn't really mastered the wheel, though. It was a primitive culture.
They
didn't need the wheel. You know, the interesting thing.
They mastered the canoe, which is the great transportation.
It was magnificent, the canoe. And in fairness, the French and the British were astounded at how light it was and how much it could carry.
Well, the French and the British would have perished very quickly without their First Nations.
Please don't misunderstand my remarks as being hostile to the people.
But when I hear the word primitive and First Nation, of course my hackles are going to rise. It's you know, and it's this has been the problem, is that we look at First Nations people today contemporarily and pigeonhole them again. We say, oh, there are problems with alcoholism.
I'm totally opposed to typecasting.
It's all tied to the signal.
But I mean, Champlain was in fact quite an admirer of the native people, as you know.
And he understood.
And they respected him.
When I went to school here in Canada, I don't remember learning about First Nations people. I didn't learn about the medicine, the democracy, the art. I didn't learn about the environmental stewardship. I didn't learn about how we would have lost the War of 1812 had not our Aboriginal people interceded. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So that, you know, we need to know more. Otherwise, we're just going to have
Canadians too often believe that 1867 came along and suddenly there was a country. John A. Macdonald brought us Canada. And this was a very complex groups of societies in North America before this, and it's a fascinating history, and it's a history that, you know, this is what we share, is our love of this history.
It was an underpopulated continent. I mean, if there'd been...
No, it wasn't underpopulated at all. A lot of archaeologists argue that it was as populous as Europe was, and it was the advent of diseases brought in by...
But who would say it was underpopulated?
Yeah,
and who's making these decisions? Is there some, you know, high power on... Is it a lordly decision that you're making, Conrad, that it's underpopulated, and that this one guy went away and he stayed, so therefore it's questionable then that the whole thing... I mean, every question you ask, although you right after it say, of course, I'm not being in any way, I'm not questioning anything, you are questioning everything. Every single question you asked was offensive to me, and I am not,
Are you going to subside soon?
No, I'm not. And I just want to say that if there was war between the Hurons and the Iroquois, well, they are human beings. There was war. Europe was awash with blood. Poland is running with blood. I mean, they are human beings, the same human beings as us. If there was war, there was war. Yes, okay. You know what I mean? And I think that Mr. Boyden was saying, I'm not trying to sugarcoat this. I'm not trying to say it was a paradise before the evil Europeans came over. I'm just telling the story.
I'm telling, and you know,
that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariette. Appreciate it. And, you know, and in this novel, I have three
views are being caricatured, Jason.
But that's true. There are three.
The fact is, this is a continent which, north of the Rio Grande, relatively comfortably supports 350 million people. Now, at that time, at the time we're speaking of, the arrival of Champlain, there were not more than 1 million, as far as we know, native people in that area. That's what I meant by underpopulated. No, it wasn't a lordly statement. It was a statement where it didn't take full advantage of this continent.
Archaeologists talk that there were way more than a million people. This was a continent of millions before the arrival of the Europeans. The fact of the matter is, with this book, I don't try to take sides. You know, I try to be objective with my characters in this novel.
Well, I urge you all to read it. What you didn't learn in school, there's a lot in here. And also, you know, I think that there's really good information in this book, even though it's told as a narrative and it's a sweeping story, you know, about what we can do at the moment, given the reconciliation and the residential schools and treaty rights and all the rest of that. We have a lot of work to do here in Canada. And continue writing. I'll see you at the Gillers next week. And we'll be back right after this with Commander Hadfield and Blue Rodeo. Stay with us.
But when you take away gravity, things are much roomier, where we're not talking about square footage, but cubic footage, and where you can float up, and you could put 15 people, because some are in the ceiling and some are floating up in the corner.
And we're back. So, Conrad, you had Commander Chris Hadfield in the chair this week. What was that like?
Very interesting. This is his book, and he's been away from Canada for over 20 years and is just settled here again. And he spent some years in Russia. He learned the language. He somewhat went native in certain ways. He, as everybody knows, I guess, he united cyberspace and outer space, and he has a very unique perspective and expresses himself in a very original way. My guest today is Commander Chris Hadfield, who's one of the most celebrated Canadians in the world and a person of remarkable accomplishments, both as an astronaut and as a galvanizing, motivating speaker. You spent many years in the space program. Can I just ask a few things about actually living at length where you did? I mean, you describe a lot of it in your book, but it would come as a great revelation to most of our viewers how large that space station was.
It's big for a couple reasons. It's designed for a crew of 6 permanently, but when you take away gravity, things are much roomier, where we're not talking about square footage, but cubic footage, and where you can float up and you could put 15 people, because some are in the ceiling and some are floating up in the corner. You might go through a whole day and just see one of the rest of the crew, because it was just where you were. It's that big that you don't bump into everybody every day.
Did you get any sense of the challenge of trying to figure out this whole issue of the infinite? I mean, we don't know where the end of the universe is, and we can't really grasp the concept that there could be an end of it. But did you have more profound insights into that as you looked at it all the time for months on end?
I'm not sure anybody thinks they've had profound insights. If they do, they're probably deluding themselves.
Yes.
And I think any depth of thought that I had would be more focused on looking at our own planet and looking at how the geography and the history and the civilizations that have been superimposed on the surface of it have all blended together. And when you go around it every 90 minutes and it turns underneath you, and in a glance you can see from Cairo to Lake Victoria, and you think of the history and the human struggle that has existed in those areas, and you look at the things we're doing right on the surface right now, and the examples where we're doing things terribly on the surface, that chance to look at it as one set piece, it definitely deepens your appreciation of time, but I think it also deepens your appreciation, in my case, of the human spirit and the repeated pattern by which we do everything around the planet, and the commonality of our existence as a result, which actually made me more optimistic.
Can I just ask you about your Russian phase? You spent, I think, 2 years in Russia?
About 4 years. I was NASA's director of operations in Russia.
In your, if I'm correct in this, sympathy and regard for Russian civilization, do you have any insights for us? And I mean, did you feel we have actually, despite all the historical problems, a particular affinity with that country?
I'm in an unusual position to at least talk about it, in that I used to intercept Soviet bombers off the coast of Canada with an armed CF-18, and they were armed bombers practicing cruise missile launches on North America. My profession in the 80s.
They never fired any missiles.
They did not fire any, but we had to demonstrate an ability to intercept them before they got to the release line.
Yeah.
And as you say, since then, I've lived in Russia for many years and learned to speak the language reasonably. So it was maybe not a nice introduction to learning about another nation, is that to intercept their armed vehicles to protect your own country. What I've come away with after 20 years of pretty close contact, and of course lots of Russian friends, and having lived in space with some Russians, is a great respect for their sense of history. And when I mean more than a sense of history, a great reflected pride in the things that make up Russia. It's not really a rejection of any outside influence or any westernization, but it's just almost an innate awareness and sense of the 1,000 years of struggle that made Russia what it is. And they have tremendous capability, not just the raw materials of the biggest nation on earth, and not just the various regimes that have laid certain ways of doing things, but a sense of patience and pragmatism that I haven't really seen as a national characteristic any other place that I've been.
Do you feel as a, I guess now a retired commander, which is a splendid title, by the way. I always objected when the naval title of Commodore was virtually abolished. Commodore Vanderbilt. But wasn't it Commander Whitehead, the guy who sold us the shirts and everything? But do you have strong views on the level of support appropriate to the Canadian military for a country as important as Canada has become? I mean, it's not a great power like the United States, but it's one of the 10 or so most important countries in the world. And should we have a stronger military?
It's, of course, a perennial decision that needs to be made. It's a balance that has to be drawn. I was in the Air Force for 25 years through various cycles. But it's a government department, and it has to get prioritized by the taxpayer like all of the rest of them. Fundamentally, I have both the experience and the understanding that if you are not willing to protect your stuff, someone will come and take it away.
Yes.
And that's just fundamental human nature.
And if you want to be taken seriously in the world as a country, you have to have some presence, not for jingoistic reasons.
I agree. Well,
but just bring something to the party.
More so for Canada, I think, in that we don't really even have the ability or the population to defend we have the longest border. We do not have the ability to defend it.
Now, fortunately, I mean, I'm not, in the light of recent personal events, a rabid stars and stripes waving pro-American, but we should be fair. I mean, they could have absorbed this country many times if they'd chosen to.
But it's also to their advantage to help defend it. How we choose to have a military within Canada is, of course, in concert with other countries, predominantly the United States. And it makes sense, and that's the way it
Chris,
ought to be.
if I may, for a long time it was just leave it to the Americans, and we took a holiday and sent a few peacekeepers around. That was essentially what we were doing.
No, I disagree.
Look, our share of GDP devoted to defense declined between the mid-'60s and the present by about 75%.
I agree with that. But you have to determine what is the level of preparedness for any of the possible events that may occur that threaten your nationality, your sovereignty, or your borders. And we haven't made a mistake so far, obviously, if you look at the results. But have we set ourselves up in a position that we aren't able to sustain it, or could we respond quickly enough if something happens? But maybe more importantly, the other role of the military is to exert the values that we think that are important to other places around the world, and to help stop a problem from happening somewhere else in the world that then could conceivably threaten us. And we have done a pretty good job of that, I think.
Commander, it's been splendid to have you. Thank you for joining us.
It's been a delight both to meet you and to talk with you. Thank you very much.
There you go. He didn't tell you about him being afraid of heights, did he?
No, we didn't get into that. it's very, I mean, off camera we did. It's very anomalous, but
it is. Would you not expect an astronaut to be happy with heights? I don't know.
How could he look out the window? I can't even go up to CN Tower and look through the glass floor.
He said that the sensation of weightlessness relieved him of some of his fear. You see, where he looked over, say, the balcony in a tall building, he'd feel that he could easily just fall down. But you don't have that in a weightless condition.
Wow. And somebody said that they think he's running for office. Do you think? I mean, if he did run for office, do you think that people? What do you think the general kind of consensus would be?
He has great appeal. I think lots of people would vote for him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a very charming, intelligent, interesting man. Why shouldn't they vote for him?
And he plays the guitar.
And he's a David Bowie fan.
Okay.
And he has tremendous pride in being Canadian. So I loved when he talked about being able to show the children something that they could dream towards while they were Canadian. And I know a favorite topic of mine is always our Canadian stories on our screen and our content, but we can't be what we can't see.
No,
so if we never have culture on our screen, if we never see our heroes in those contexts, how do we expect our children to strive to those great heights? This is what we need. We need our stories on our screen.
Well said, Wendy Crewson. Okay, stay with us. We're going to orbit back to you in a minute.
200 miles to sunrise. 200 miles of this ice and snow.
panel.
Sounds like it.
Good work.
It does.
You get your reward now because now it's time for Blue Rodeo. Okay. Hello. Hi, sweetie. It's so lovely to have you here with your celebrating your 13th studio record.
Yes.
You celebrated 25 years last year.
25 years since the release of Outskirts.
Unbelievable.
You've been a band longer than that.
Yeah, I remember that record. Totally.
Really? You must have been a toddler.
Oh, yes, excellent. This is why we love him so much. Okay. But you're about to go on the road.
January.
January. For what is your 50th tour of Canada? And you're going in January.
I don't know where that came from.
But you know what?
But that's okay, sure.
I just couldn't understand that after
2 a year, I don't know.
so many years and so much great music, you're still insisting on going on tour in Canada in January. Right.
Can't see this winter road for the fog and snow. Slipping through one up a day, headed east on 17. Chimney stacks a few miles back, all done up like rocket ships. So many words I should have said. Spent all night trying to forget the ones I did. This road is a thorn, a river of regret. The wind howls like a ghost inside my head. I was so wrong, now there's no returning. 200 miles till sunrise, 200 miles of this ice and snow. I greet the dawn in Mattawa. I greet the dawn in Mattawa. Sadness in the morning comes with the break of day. For the dawn is a thief that steals your dreams away. I was so wrong, now there's no returning. 200 miles till sunrise, 200 miles of this ice and snow. I greet the dawn in Mattawa. I greet the dawn in Mattawa. Thank you very much.
Blue Rodeo, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be right back. Stick around.
Many of the native people do not wish to assimilate entirely to the way of life of the rest of us. but do not wish to live at the margin and primitively as their ancestors did either. After decades of often earnest effort but general lack of success, there are rays of hope for the native people. They have historic rights, but as the heirs of a Stone Age civilization, they cannot altogether plausibly regret all that has happened since the arrival of the explorers and colonists. Many of the native people do not wish to assimilate entirely to the way of life of the rest of us, but do not wish to live at the margin and primitively as their ancestors did either. It is a segment of the population that is artificially divided between an excessive number of tribes and bands, and which, in the name of resurrection of ancient rights, has an uneven quality of local governance. And it is certainly a people that has often been shortchanged in its treaty rights. The native people have been the victims of genetic problems of alcoholism and of a heavy-handed imposition of the criminal justice system. The most hopeful event of recent times in this area is the appointment of Bob Ray, an enlightened authority on all these issues, to a key position with the Mattawa Indians of Northern Ontario. We can only wish him and them well.
We invite you to join the conversation about any topic we've discussed tonight. Go to our website, Twitter, or Facebook. We also want to hear from you about next week's topic. November 11th is Remembrance Day. And with Canada's strong military tradition, we're asking, would you support your child or grandchild joining today's Canadian Forces? We might feature your response on an upcoming show. And there we are. So next week, please tell us what you think. And you're going to be away. You're going to be in Australia.
I will be in Australia, and Moses Neimer will be here, and I'm sure he'll acquit himself admirably.
I think he will, yes. So, and I just want to let you know that we're working on a show about assisted suicide at the moment. There was tragic news about an elderly Toronto couple in declining health who jumped together to their deaths from their 18th-story apartment balcony. That and the death of terminally ill Dr. Donald Lowe has reignited the whole debate around end-of-life laws in Canada, just as the Quebec government moves closer to passing Bill 52, a proposal that would decriminalize medically assisted suicide. So, with 80% of Quebecers supporting the motion, the PQ is expected to pass this Bill 52 by year's end. So we're going to have some of the key players around this table in the coming weeks. You'll want to stay tuned for that. So thank you, panel, for being splendiferous today. And thank you, audience. And we're going to see you next week. Zoom out, everyone.